very privately. You never saw him anywhere, and an interview was out of the question. He did have one quirk, though. From time to time he would publish something, either a brief essay in an obscure independent journal, or a research article on military strategy aimed at the highest echelons of the army, or even a piece of fiction that showed off his talent for paradox in the best Russian tradition. He never wrote under his own name, but he interspersed his text with allusions that offered clues about the new world that was taking shape in the late-night Kremlin sessions. That, at any rate, was what the court followers in Moscow and in foreign ministries abroad believed, racing to be the first to decipher Baranov's hidden meaning. The pseudonym he used for these pronouncements, Nikolai Brandes, added a further element of confusion. Adepts quickly recognize it as the name of a minor character in a seldom-read novel by Joseph Roth. Brandes, a Tatar, plays the part of a deus ex machina, appearing at crucial moments in the story only to disappear immediately after. "It doesn't require strength to conquer something," he says. "Everything yields to you. Everything's rotten and surrenders. Knowing how to give things up, that's what counts." Just as the other characters in Roth's novel track Nikolai Brandes' actions obsessively, since his extraordinary indifference is the only guarantor of success, so the high-ranking office holders in the Kremlin and their satellites would pounce on the slightest indication of Baranov's thinking in the hope of learning the Tsar's intentions. What made the whole exercise precarious was that the wizard of the Kremlin believed that plagiarism was the foundation of all progress. You could therefore never truly tell whether he was expressing his own ideas or playing with someone else's. This game of cat and mouse reached its high point one winter night, when a dense pack of luxury cars, with their escort of sirens and bodyguards, converged on a small avant-garde theatre in Moscow where a one-act play by a certain Nikolai Brandes was being performed. Queuing at the door were bankers, oil magnates, ministers, and FSB generals. "In a civilized country," says the play's central character, "civil war would erupt. But as we don't have citizens here, we'll have a war between lackeys. It's no worse than a civil war, just a bit more distasteful, more sordid." To all appearances, Baranov wasn't in the crowd that night, but to be safe, the bankers and ministers still applauded wildly. Some claimed that Baranov was watching the audience through a tiny peephole to the right of the balcony. Yet even these somewhat childish games hadn't cured Baranov of his disaffection. At a certain point, the few people who actually met him began to notice that his moods were growing darker. He was reported to be anxious, tired, thinking of other things. He'd climbed the ranks too soon, and now he was bored, with himself most of all, and with the Tsar, who for his part was never bored. And he was starting to hate Baranov. "What? I brought you all this way and you have the gall to be bored." One should never underestimate the sentimental side of political relationships. Until one day Baranov disappeared. A terse note from the Kremlin announced that the political advisor to the President of the Russian Federation had resigned. And then all trace of him disappeared, except for occasional sightings of him around the globe, though none were ever confirmed. When I arrived in Moscow a few years later, Baranov's memory hovered in the air like an amorphous shadow. No longer tied to his quite substantial physical body, it was free to appear in one place or another, wherever it could be used to explain a particularly obscure action on the part of the Kremlin. And given that Moscow, inscrutable capital of a new era whose contours none could define, had come unexpectedly into the forefront once again, obsessive interpreters of the former magus of the Kremlin had cropped up even among those of us in the foreign community. A BBC journalist had made a documentary arguing that Baranov was the man responsible for bringing the techniques of avant-garde theatre into politics. Another journalist described him in a book as a kind of magician who made people and political parties appear and disappear at the snap of his fingers. A professor had devoted